Hey everyone, Wuuzai here. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get into it. First, we're going to start going over talents. This is going to be your in-game talent setup, I would say, where you have your 6 in Beastmastery, your standard 14 in Marks, 51 in Survival, along with using Explosive Trap, Explosive Shot, and Kill Shot for your DPS glyphs. I don't entertain using Glyph of Serpent Sting at all because trap weaving is just too strong, and it's something that you're just going to have to do if you want to parse with the class effectively. So I really recommend this build once your hit situation is all taken care of in game, and you don't need really any points in focused aim here. Going on from this, we'll go over kind of like your transitioning phase talent build, I would like to call it. So if you do need any points here in focused aim, with sims that I've ran, particularly as you start needing 2 talent points in focus aim because it would require too many hit gems, switching over to the improved Hunter's Mark build generally will provide you with more DPS. Now, if you are playing this build and you have an additional hunter in your raid or 2, I really suggest taking the Glyph of Hunter's Mark as well. It's going to net you more raid DPS overall. But if you are a solo hunter, you can switch out Glyph of Hunter's Mark for your Glyph of Kill Shot, and this will generally be your best setup that you can do. And as you get more hit items, let's say you're able to go from that 5 to 6% hit threshold, you can start taking points here out of focused aim and putting them into improved aspect of the Hawk. Now, in some guilds, you may be required to be the improved Hunter's Mark hunter, especially if you don't run any marksman hunters. And if that is the case, what I would recommend is running with Glyph of Hunter's Mark for your other hunters, and taking points out of focus aim as you gear up as well, and transitioning these 3 points over into improved aspect of the Hawk. I've done simming for all the other talents. This has always been the best setup that I could find. As well, if you are running improved Hunter's Mark, you're still going to be trap weaving. It's by far the best DPS that you're going to be able to get out of your hunter. Now to go over gearing. So this is going to be your overall best setup that you're going to be able to have on your hunter for survival if you are trap weaving. The only real big point of contention here in the gearing is with your trinkets. Greatness is always going to be equipped. You'll never be swapping this trinket out. As for different fights in Naxxramas, especially, Fury of the 5 Flights is not always going to be your best option, nor is Mirror of Truth. Generally, Fury of the 5 Flights sims slightly ahead of Mirror of Truth by about 20 DPS, but the great thing about the trinket is there's no RNG involved in the trinket, unlike getting Mirror of Truth to proc, so it's just going to be more consistent for you. Now, one thing to note on fights like Anubercon or Faerlina, where like volley damage is involved, or a lot of AoE damage where you may not be directly attacking or auto-shotting a lot, you're going to want to switch Fury of the 5 Flights out for Lotheb Shadow in these situations. It's just going to net you a lot more DPS for those fights. So, I would look at trying to pick up both of those trinkets. Outside of everything else, it's just on you and your guild, to be able to acquire these major pieces. I will talk about a few. Obviously, the most important item for you to get is your gun, Envoy Immortality, pretty much a given. Outside of that, there are your bigger hit items that you're going to look for going for. That's going to be your Frosted Adroit Handguards, your Valorous Cryptstalker's Tunic, and your Lakings of Failed Escape. Outside of those items for hit, your biggest 2 upgrades are generally going to be your Boots of Renewed Flight and your Blue Aspect Helm. But, at this point in the phase, you probably got your gearing situation figured out, so do with this what you will, and that's the trinket situation for gearing. Now let's go over the rotation for how it works with trap weaving. In general priority, you're going to want to do your Explosive Shot, then your Trap / Black Arrow, Your Serpent Sting, make sure that's applied to the target. Multi-shot, then steady shot. So just to try and demonstrate a basic example of that, it would be explosive into trap, serpent, filler, explosive shot. I get a lock and load here, so I'm going to use it, and then go back into my filler. Now, something that you saw me do there was something called the explosive shot 434 rotation that the hunter community found that does more damage. Going over that, what it means essentially is during your lock and load proc, you're going to cast a rank 4 explosive shot, followed by a rank 3, and then another rank 4. And the whole goal of this is, in terms of fight length on your second lock and load, by doing this, essentially, without doing the additional filler of like a multi-shot steady serpent in between how it would normally be done, you know, rank 4 explosive shot filler, rank 4 explosive filler. This allows you to essentially cast an additional explosive shot every 2 lock and loads, which equates to a little over like 130 DPS. Veramos has made some great videos on the 434 and trap weaving, and those will be linked down in the description of the video. Now, something I also wanted to do here is go over some of the more, I would say, not so straightforward fights in Naxx and how you would essentially parse on them, and some tips and tricks I found out along the way. Starting off with the Nubricon, and this kind of goes for Grand Widow as well. Both of his adds do count towards your parse. Something to note though, if you are going to be casting volley on the adds, you're going to want to delay your rapid fire until after the adds are dead, as rapid fire does not affect volley speed at all. Moving on to Grand Widow, something to note here, only 2 of her adds count towards your parse. The other 4 worshippers that are used to dispel the enrage on the boss do not count towards your parse. Something that will be important on this boss for you being able to parse is most guilds should be able to just tank Faerlina in the Rain of Fire she does cast on the raid. Otherwise, she's going to be constantly getting moved out of your trap, and then you're just going to have a really hard time to compete on this boss. Mexna. Going over this boss. This boss I actually do not recommend trapping on, but you can get 1 trap off on this boss. And if you have rocket boots, you can rocket boots on top of her hitbox. Although it is a bit finicky, it's really hard to see, but you essentially need to drop the trap dead center of her hitbox, otherwise it just does not like to trigger on this boss, and use the remaining duration of your rocket boost to get back out. And you want to do this within the cooldown of your explosive shot. Moving on to Noth, the adds on his encounter do not count towards your parse at all, so you can completely ignore these adds on the encounter and just burn this boss. Something else that's huge and massive for you to being able to parse on this boss is making sure that your guild is able to kill Noth before his teleport. Grobulus. Okay, so with Grobulus, depending on whether or not you trap on this boss is going to be completely dependent on your tank and how good he is at moving the boss. Also your melee on them not dying. If you have any say-so in your guild, you should be telling your melee to sit on the side of the boss, so that way the boss will have movement like this with the melee on the side, and if you're able to slowly drag this boss, you are able to run in and drop a trap in front of the boss as it moves. Moving on to Gluth. Gluth would be similar to my Exno, where I'd only really recommend trapping on the boss once, but there is some tech that you can do on this boss. Is, you know, the boss starts right here. Well, when you're coming out of the pipe, something that you can do on your hunter is disengage parachute cloak to the door, obviously be shooting the boss in the air while you do this, and pre-lay a trap about here that your tank can then drag the boss over into. You know, kind of make him aware of it as well. Lay your trap, and then you're going to move out here to the side as the boss gets dragged up to where it's going to end up being tanked for the rest of the fight. And then for your second trap, you have rocket boots to run in and trap again. For Thaddeus, something we need to go over on this fight so you don't kill your other teammates that are on the other side of the boss. You're going to want to learn how to do something called jump/strafe trapping. And let me just tab in the game here real quick to show you what that is. Essentially, when you strafe and or jump with your character, it has the leeway mechanic and you can throw a trap further. So if I just set down a regular trap, you'll see where it gets laid here. But then if I was to perform a jump trap, it throws it twice the distance. This is something you're just going to need to really learn how to do for Thaddeus to make it safe for you to be able to parse on. Another note for Thaddeus is when you do have to switch sides on the boss, if it happens to line up with your trap timing, as you move through the boss, you can drop your trap underneath him and then continue to move on to the other side. The only caveat to that is while the initial tick of the trap when it explodes is snapshotted and you won't have the damage buff for that initial explosion of the trap, the dot that the trap has on the ground is dynamic and will dynamically buff and update with your higher percentage damage increase when you get your connection back with your teammates. On Saffron, you can do something called pre-trapping. I haven't gone over that a lot in this video because it's 100% guild dependent, and it's up to you to talk with your raid leader and your guild members on if they want to go through initiating longer pull timers and all that stuff that's involved with some of the higher levels of parsing that they want to do, but this one isn't very guild reliant at all. So before Saffron is spawned, what you can do coming out the gate is make sure you're an aspect of the pack, not only for you, but for your teammates. And you don't want to trigger the boss early. And then once you get out to about here, outside of your little alcove that you start in, you're going to want to rocket boot straight to the center of the room and drop a trap right here in the middle. And then you will rotate out to wherever your next position is, and then when the boss spawns, your trap will be underneath it. Make sure you have an MD on the tank, otherwise you might rip threat right away from the boss. But you'll have your pre-trap, and then shortly after you'll be able to black arrow in your opener as well, and not only have explosive trap running but black arrow. So something very neat that you can do, and you can do it on a lot more bosses in the raid, but entirely guild dependent. If you guys would like to see a video of pre-trapping and when and how you can do it with your guild, let me know down in the comments. And finally, Kel'Thuzad. So for parsing on Kel'Thuzad, it's kind of unique. The parsing does not start until Kel'Thuzad himself becomes active. Once he is active, the log starts recording all the damage that you do. Any of the adds in phase 1, like the abominations, the skeletons, or the soul weavers, don't count in P1. Now, as for phase 2, the soul weavers do count towards your parse, and Kel'Thuzad counts towards your parse. Something to note as well is that the guardians that get triggered at 40% of the boss do not count towards your parse, but if they are tanked close enough to Kel'Thuzad, when you do trap on this boss, if you're brave enough to do so, will essentially, while they don't count towards your parse, once your explosive trap is on the ground, you have more ticks of your explosive trap going out to trigger your lock and load to happen quicker, so you can get it back on cooldown for another one. Now, trapping on this boss can be a little bit tricky, but you as the hunter, typically you're going to want to sit behind one of the typically two melee groups that you're going to have, about 10 yards out, right here around this outer edge ring. And you're essentially going to be running on top of a melee group to throw your trap and back out. You don't want to be running here in the center or over top of the tank or anything like that, because in the event that you mess up timings on the boss and you run here and an ice tomb happens, luckily you're not on the tank freezing the tank or freezing both melee groups and just causing a bad time. Something also to note, that if you're going to be trapping on this boss, if a melee gets MC'd, you're definitely going to want druids to cyclone that melee individual so your trap isn't dealing damage to him or your multi-shots. Outside of that, also something to note is you're going to want to do this in between frostbolt volleys as well. So there's a lot to consider on this boss, and you can mess it up quite easily. But to, go big or go home, you're going to have to trap weave on this boss as well. You're not going to want to do your trap weave shortly after Frostbolt Volley goes out, because you will be slowed. There is some cheese you can do by asking your paladins for freedom, but you know that gets way more involved than what this video here will go over. And that's pretty much it here. Thank you again for watching the video to this point, and thank you again for all the love and comments on the first video that I released when I got my rank 1 run. If you'd like to see more content, again, like, comment, subscribe, and in the comments, let me know specifically what you would like to see about Hunter. I get a lot of questions every day, you know, so just throw it my way and I'll see what I can do. Y'all have a good one.